Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In this video we are going to learn how to build an LLM and RAG-based chat application using AlloyDB and LangChain. We all know RAG, Retrieval-Augmented Generation. It helps reduce hallucination by guiding LLMs to draw data and information from our own data. So this is basically and essentially very useful even for businesses because there could be concepts that could be vaguely defined on the web that you have specific definitions for. So when you prepare your own document and feed it to an LLM, that's RAG. The LLM pulls information from your data and gives you customized information. So we are going to be using Alloy DB, and Alloy DB AI is Google Cloud's database for AI-powered applications. Also, would use LangChain. That's a framework for developing applications to connect LLM to external databases. So by the end of this video, would see how LLMs process languages and how RAG enhances their capability by retrieving relevant information from your knowledge base. So um, let's just get started. The first thing we want to do is to activate our Cloud Shell. So we have a Cloud Shell here. So we want to activate that. Continue. Let me expand my screen. Right. So this is our environment on Google Cloud Shell. So this is optional. You don't have to do this, but I like to. Oh yeah, authorize. Yes. So I like to confirm my account settings. So like I said, this is not necessary. So this just gives me back. So this piece of code gives you your project ID. Normally it's supposed to be the same thing here, but in in real life you could be working on many projects at the same time. So you just want to confirm that the one you are working on cloud shell is the one you're supposed to be working on. Anyways, let's get to the first thing you do is to configure your your project. So here I'm going to set the region to US Central 1, and that's successful. And the next thing I want to do is to install Postgres client, and that's because AlloyDB uses Postgres client. So to install Postgres client, you enter this code. Yeah. So first off, no, I don't want a passphrase. I don't want a passphrase. So I want to connect to the virtual machine, and that is exactly what I've just done right now. So to install the Postgres client, first you connect to the virtual machine. This is the code I just ran to connect to the virtual machine. So you want to gcloud compute SSH, the name of your instance, and zone equals that region. Um, so um, so the next thing I want to do is, now that we've just connected to the VM, we want to install our software and make sure it's up to date. So you want to run sudo apt updates, and it's going to install, and it says that our progress client is already the newest version. So this is great. So the next thing we do now is to connect to the primary instance from our VM using PSQL. So to do that, um, usually you should already have your password. your AlloyDB PG password. So you put that in here, and so this piece of code extracts the your project ID. This piece of code right here extracts your instance IP, so you don't have to enter all these values manually. So let us exit. This is successful. We have a Postgres interface. Let's just exit because we don't need it right now, where we just set that up. So the next thing we're going to do is to initialize the database. So to do that, first off, we want to create a database, and to do that, you run this code, create database, and the name of our database will be called assistant demo. So it has just created. And the next thing we want to do is to enable a PG vector extension. Remember I mentioned that we'll be using the information from AlloyDB with an LLM, and LLMs perform vector search. So we want to create extension vector, and we have done that successfully. And the next thing we do now is to install Python. We're just, setting up our environment for our data. So to install Python, you run sudo apt install, just the usual code for installing Python. So once that is done, we can go ahead. This is done. We can go ahead to check whether it was successful by checking the Python version, and it was 3.11.2. That is great. So the next thing we do now is to populate the database. So Google Cloud has a GitHub repository that we are going to clone. So let's clone that. So that GitHub repository contains a lot of code and data that we are going to use for lack of our own data at this point. So we have just cloned it, but let's take a quick look at it, at what we have just cloned. So ls GenAI database retrieval app. So this is it. GenAI database retrieval app. This is what we just cloned. And let's take a quick look at so we're going to be using the retrieval service. So let's look into the retrieval service. So we're going to be using the retrieval service and run database in it. So this gets connects us or populates our own database with all of this data. We have about 4 CSV files. So let's find that. So we have data. So this is it. This is a tabular data. Interesting. Okay. This is too large. This is symbol air policy ID content. Okay, this is interesting. That's a lot. Hmm. Well, it has the embeddings already. Content embeddings. That's all. Okay, interesting. Okay, so we have flight dataset CSV, which is also too large. So we just cloned that repository. So the next thing we want to do is want to prepare configuration file in our virtual machine. So let's run this code. So we want to cd into this folder, and we want to copy the config file basically. So cat config, yep. So we've just done that. And the next thing we want to do is to populate our database with sample datasets. So to do that, let's run this code. We want to install the requirements.txt. So the requirement.txt contains all of the packages that we need to run to run this. So when we do pip install, it installs all those packages one by one. We just inspected run underscore database underscore init.py, and we saw that it was going to basically help us draw data from four CSV files. So we already inspected that. So we just let that run. So this is an example. Supposing you have your own data set, that's even better because you don't have to clone any Git repository. Um, you just have your own. You just move your own data set into Google Cloud. Or if you have your data set on GitHub, you can put it on GitHub and then clone it. But when you clone it, won't be with Google Cloud GitHub repositories URL. It will then be with your own URL. So while we are waiting, okay, yes, it's done. So the next thing we want to do is to deploy the retrieval service to Google Cloud. So the repository we just cloned has, if you did notice, retrieval service code. So we want to deploy that to Cloud Run. So this service is going to be responsible for working with the database to extract necessary information from the database when a user inputs a prompt or a question, as the case may be. So what we're going to do is let's open a new tab, and in that new tab, let's run this code. Let's run this code. So basically, it's going to create service accounts, permissions, and all. Yeah, it has done that. So the next thing we want to do, we can just exit. We don't need this anymore. Right, so we are back to our original workspace. So the next thing we want to do is to deploy the retrieval service. So let's just run this. To deploy the retrieval service, let us run this. Okay, so we run that. It's going to take some time. But if you read what we're doing, what it's doing in the background, this is a Docker app already. It's just going to put together the whole app and everything in it. This will take some time, so I'll just go grab a cup of coffee. I'll be right back. This is done. So the next thing we want to do is let's just verify this service. So we see that we have a service URL. So I'm just going to put that in a different tab, and we'll come to why I did that soon. So we have a hello world message. So this works. So the next thing we want to do is let's deploy the sample application. So for deployment, we want to cd into our cloned repository, and we want to install everything in the requirements.txt. Then once we are done with that, let's run this code. And the next one I want to do is to prepare a client ID. And to prepare a client ID, search for API and services. Let's minimize this a little bit. We want to go to authentication consent screen, and we want to, let's call this, what do we call this? Let's call this symbol air. Symbol air. Let's use this. Let me copy that as well. Next. So let's choose internal. Next. Let's use the same email. Yes, I agree, and finish. Then let's create this. Oh, that was fast. So the next thing we want to do is to, let's see, create a client ID. We want to create a client ID. So to create a client ID, you either tap on client or you go back to API and services. You go to, let's see, credentials. It's all the same thing. You still create credentials, this, and then, so this is a web application. Let's leave it at web client 1. So I want to add a URI, but whatever I add here at this point is just going to be a placeholder. So since it's just going to be a placeholder, I can just grab this. This is going to be a placeholder. I can just grab this. Let's add another one. I can just grab this. For this one, I want to include my port. So let's say I want my app to run on port 8081, which is okay. Then I want to, for the authorized redirect URL, this is still going to be a placeholder, and I'm going to replace this one with the port. Let's say we chose 8081 slash login slash Google. Okay, so we create. Takes a little. Oh, that's great. So the next thing, we just copied our client ID, and the next thing we want to do, um, let's expand. Yes. So the next one I want to do is, let's check that this works. So we have client ID. That's an underscore equals you paste your client ID. So this is the expected behavior. The next thing we do, let's run the application. So we say Python run app.py. Right. So it's running. So the next thing we want to do is to connect to the application. So let's try connecting to the application. So we just opened a new tab. We paste this. So we paste this, and yeah, this is the expected response. Ignore this. So we go to web preview. We want to view this. So yes, this is what our application looks like. So you can see that, for example, if we entered queries like, when is the next flight to Atlanta, to Atlanta. Great. And what snacks can I get near gate A6? Let's see. Where are the gift shops located? So you see why this is why this is great. Where are the gift shops located? Then it has given you some information. So let's test this for more context. Let's say I miss my flight. Let's say I missed this flight. So let me ask, what can I do if I miss my flight from to Atlanta? So what can I do? Just testing for context. Let's see. Yeah, if I have a fully refunded ticket, I can cancel it. That's true. Until 60 minutes prior. Oh, this is great. What number can I call to help me reschedule? Right. Okay, so this is great. So we have one more thing left. So now that we have launched our app, uh, we want to update our URI. So let's grab this. We want to copy that and let's go back here. Minimize this a little bit. So this is what we want to do. We want to use the first part of our URI and we want to provide that to the authorized JavaScript origins. So you can either add it or you just replace it. So I'll just replace it. Right? I'll just replace this. Right. And I'll do the same thing here. I'll just replace this and I'll save it. Yay. And we are done. So once you do that, you're done. Um, when is the next flight to Chicago? Chicago. So if you did enjoy this video, please remember to subscribe, like it,